Good evening, everyone. I'm really delighted to be here tonight to serve as moderator for two reasons. First, it's always a unique opportunity to mingle with fellow alumni and sort of be reminded of the experiences that we all had while studying at the U of C. And so I hope to meet many of you later and reconnect with some of you. And the second reason I'm really happy to be here is because I think tonight's topic on entrepreneurship is extremely interesting, especially given the current state of the economy and the current state of the job market. And, at the heart of it, entrepreneurship, I think, is about the creation of opportunity. The creation of opportunity for the entrepreneurs themselves and for those who enjoy the fruits of their labor. For example, customers, employees of the venture. And I think most of us would agree here tonight that society really relies on the creation of new opportunity, and it can only progress when these new opportunities come to surface. So with that said, what I'd like to first do is have the panelists, and we'll start with Gurjot here, to give just a few sentences on their background, your U of C connection, and your entrepreneurial pursuits, and then we can formally open the panel with all of my great questions.
Hi, my name is Gurjot Sidhu. I have a BA from Chicago in econ and an MBA. And out of school, I went into very traditional management consulting at KPMG for a number of years, and then came to work in New York and ultimately started my own boutique e-commerce strategy consulting business, which went great. And luckily, I got out of the industry before it crashed, so that was nice. I stayed home and had kids and raised them for a while, and recently in the last year I launched a business that is, I design custom business wear for business women. And so it's my first endeavor into the fashion industry, but second as an entrepreneur. And it's been really fun and interesting so far.
Hi, my name is Linda Sedloff-Orton. Some of you who signed up early may have seen an error that I graduated in 97. In fact, I graduated in 87, so any of you who expected someone a little younger, I apologize. I studied English, and people say to me, how does English on any day help you with your business? And I can honestly say it was one of the luckiest choices I could have made, because it taught me how to write. And writing for my current venture, Intelligent Video Solutions, or its parent company, Intelligent Marketing Solutions, which I started in 97 and primarily did marketing placement and marketing consulting, it was a huge distinguishing factor. So I am one of these people who is called a serial entrepreneur. I've had numerous ventures. I've sold some of them. They've all been bootstrapped. I own two recruitment firms, one of which I sold, Intuition Financial Placement. I created a self-help game called Map Your Life, which was a little early and unfortunately launched just around 9/11. But I love sharing my passion with people who are considering it. And if I may ask an audience poll, how many people in the audience are thinking about starting their own venture? Raise them up high. I'm short. Okay. How many people currently are here just to listen and to get a little bit of information, even though they really are scared out of their minds about doing their own thing? Okay. Okay. Well, hopefully we'll answer all of your questions. Thanks for being here.
My name is George Boyajian. I received a PhD in the geophysical sciences at the University of Chicago, which subsequently made me qualified to be a professor at Penn, which ended after about 5-6 years. I had enough of that. I decided, I'd always had a passion for how do you get the technologies that reside within the academy out to help people. It's been a passion of mine since I was a kid, believe it or not. And once I went into the private sector, the first company I launched was a company that took genetically engineered plants and I used them to clean up environmental contamination. Not the most successful venture, but a lot of lessons learned, which is part of being a serial entrepreneur. You learn your lessons from the mistakes you make. We got the first genetically engineered tree released into the environment. I got that done. Then went to Columbia University and helped launch a venture there during the dot-com boom, where we were licensing content and software out of Columbia University into the private sector. And then subsequently in 2002, I launched the venture with my partner, which was a system that monitored the elderly living at home alone. It ended up being a medical device / service, and raised a lot of money in that. It's a technology-based service, not bootstrapped, unfortunately. And then we ended up, eventually, that was acquired by GE Healthcare. And now I'm on a little bit of a sabbatical in this environment, especially in the medical device area. Time to sit on the sidelines until the economy turns a little bit.
My name's Jesse Solomon. Thank you, Josh.
I can hear you.
So my name's Jesse Solomon. I graduated from Chicago with a degree in anthropology and subsequently went into emerging market investments, which makes sense, obviously. I took a job with HSBC in London and moved around with them a lot, from London to Hong Kong and then finally Dubai. And then I stayed in Dubai for another 2 years working for a hedge fund managing our investments in the Middle East and Africa. And it was an amazing experience. I loved it, but I was abroad for a long time, and I really wanted to take ownership of a venture of my own. And I had a lot of free reign within the organizations that I worked in, but to me it still wasn't enough. So when I got back to New York and reconnected with Josh, and we started exploring different ventures to start, and then we co-founded our current venture, which is Rights Genie, which is an online media marketplace for content. That's the basic story.
Yeah. So I'm Josh Brody. I'm Jesse's business partner, and I graduated from the college in 2003 with a degree in sociology and cinema and media studies, and I actually stayed for an extra year and got my master's in the humanities, largely because I didn't know necessarily what I wanted to do next, or rather how I wanted to do it. I always sort of had aspirations of going into the media business, and even though I'm from Los Angeles, I didn't really know kind of how to do that. So I stayed an extra year, got my master's, and then kind of figured things out. Moved back to Los Angeles and started in the mailroom of Endeavor, which was at the time Endeavor. It's since merged with William Morris, which is a large Hollywood talent agency that's run by Ari Emanuel. And I was there for a couple of years and actually left with one of the partners to help him start a company called Media Rights Capital, which is a production finance company backed by Goldman Sachs, AT&T, and the WPP Advertising Group. I was there for a couple more years and sort of always had this itch, like Jesse mentioned, to start my own thing. Ended up moving to New York about 2 years ago to go to business school at Columbia, got my MBA, and Jesse and I actually reconnected in the process, and we ended up starting the company when I was in school. Graduated in May, and we launched Rights Genie actually at the beginning of the year, but we launched our service over the summer, and we're currently backed by Columbia University and some other individuals in the entertainment space.
Okay, thank you. So since there's so many people in the audience that are thinking about pursuing entrepreneurialism in whatever area, I'd like to open tonight's conversation around the personality of the entrepreneur, right? And getting to know, based on your personal experiences, what are the top 3 traits, if you had to boil it down? I'm sure there are many, many traits that any person needs to succeed in a career, but the top 3 traits that, in your experience, really makes a difference between an average entrepreneur versus a very, very successful one. And I think I'd like to start with Jesse and Josh down there, since you are our most recent graduates on the panel, to share what you guys have learned so far. Top 3.
Yeah, so top 3.
Yes.
I mean, I'll give one. Jesse could give one or fix whatever I say. The first one that comes to mind is just, this is really hard, right? So, every day is up and down, and, you are constantly sort of confronted with obstacles and people telling you no and people telling you that your idea doesn't have merit. And, I think that in order to do this well, you have to be so driven that gratification is irrelevant, that you can't be so attached to the outcome that it matters. You just have to be sort of obsessed with your idea and obsessed with the process, and be agile and be flexible and be perseverant.
Yeah, I would say, I don't like hearing my voice in the echo. Anyway, I would say a sense of fanaticism, being fanatical about what you're doing. And it's funny, I'm not a very religious person, but the longer I've been doing this, the more I see similarities between myself and religious, I don't want to say maybe fanatics, but like people who... Zealots, religious zealots, that's probably a better word. But, you have this sometimes unfounded belief that what you're doing is right, and that you have this vision for how things are going to be and how the world is going to change, and how what you're doing fits into that vision. And sometimes you can't prove it. You try your best every day to work on that. But I think just having that belief that what you're doing is good.
Okay. George?
Well, you're going to hear a lot of the same things, I think, but passion for what it is you do, because it's what you do every day that you enjoy, and part of it is dealing with every obstacle that the world has to throw up in front of you, whether it's 9/11, and I ran into a 9/11. We were going to close on about $100 million, led in part by the city of New York on September 18th, 2001. So you can see after a year of work and something like that, worse things happen to other people, okay? But, you have to forge through whatever is thrown at you and just be ready for that. So determination is clearly one, and combined with passion. At the same time, knowing you have a vision, I think that clear thinking and evidence-based thinking is actually very useful. Look at the data, be able to understand the data, be able to think clearly about the data, talk to your clients and listen to what they have to say. That's data. So as much as you want to pursue your vision, you have to be flexible enough in the light of reality to make sure that you're passionate about it working. It's not about you necessarily, but ultimately about your clients and the service that you're providing. So keeping, to some degree, your ego out of it entirely. And those are the two biggest ones that come to mind.
Nobody's mentioned the word sales yet, and I'm a little surprised by that, because I think that sales is an integral component to any entrepreneurial venture, and unless you're fortunate enough to be the partner involved who has no responsibility for sales, I can guarantee you that every single of your waking life will somehow touch on sales, and that being your revenue stream, your clients, in social media now, what your clients or potential clients are saying about you, and whether it's a service company or a product company, don't think that your idea is above the S word, because it's not. You may have a different tranche of buyers, and you may have a professional services group rather than a mass consumer, but it is absolutely imperative that you understand who your customers or clients will be and how you're going to sell to them. I'm going to mention something else that nobody said yet. I personally think ADD or ADHD is a fabulous trait to have if you're an entrepreneur. And I started selling when I was a small child. I started making flower combs. I grew up in Queens, and I sold them at Roosevelt Field. Anybody remember the what did they call it, flea market? And it was a great way of learning, actually, at that point, how to do business and how not to take an order unless somebody was going to give me a down payment. And I think the idea of going from that venture when I was 7 to a great blizzard that we had when I was 8 or 9 and shoveling driveways. And I moved around a lot when I was younger in my entrepreneurial ventures, but ultimately having that passion, which I would say is that third piece. And I started taking photographs on spec of kids in the playgrounds when I was just a little bit older than the kids I was taking photos of. And I think that the visual piece has always been part, and I don't know if those of you who are considering it now, can look back and say, I had that passion when I was a child, or some iteration of that passion, but understanding how that core piece translates into what you want to do now, and understanding the reasons why you're so passionate about something can help you, as George said, take the ego out of it perhaps at times. So sales, ADD, and passion.
Can I
Sure.
add one thing, because you reminded me of the other thing is, if you're a perfectionist, being
Not
an
so much.
entrepreneur is not suited to you. Okay, it's an 80-20 world, and you've got 100 things to do, and you've got to be satisfied with the 80% solution and move on, because you don't know what the 100% solution is when you're starting up anyway. So I would just don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That's it.
Said. Good job.
Well, I think everyone hit on a lot of great points. I don't know how much I'd have to add, but I guess I think of it in terms of three categories. One is the first thing that came to mind when you asked the question, which I kind of sort of forgot now, but when you asked, my first thought was faith. And it wasn't necessarily, from a religious context or perspective, but just faith. You got to absolutely 100% believe in yourself and recognize evidence and kind of signposts and, indicators of how awesome you really are. And I hope you don't take that as me being totally arrogant, because I have 4 children and they use words like this, so I end up copying them. I'm sorry. But, little children, they have so much faith in themselves. I'm very inspired by my kids because they haven't been judged by society yet. They haven't, had enough hard knocks to hold themselves back. And I think one of the things I'm really grateful about in being able to be an entrepreneur a couple times now is that being an entrepreneur really allows you to express yourself, who you are, your view of the world, your, what piece of it you think you have an opinion about, something you feel you can change. And I think just believing in yourself and having faith is such a wonderful starting point. That probably sounds so touchy-feely, but that's been my experience. And, I've worked in many industries, in consulting and in banking and now in fashion. And I think the next category, which may be still part of faith, is instinct, trusting your instinct and your intuition. So now I'm way off in the touchy-feely realm. I know you're like, oh my God, what kind of books does this girl read? But instinct and intuition have been huge for me in this latest venture. And I'm funding it myself. It's my dream. It's what I want to do with the rest of my life. I'm so grateful to be able to be in this position. And I think and I'm bootstrapping all the way, and when you're coming at it from that very real perspective, I don't know, suddenly when I kind of allowed myself to follow my instinct and my intuition, really the best decisions followed that I've made so far. And fashion's a new industry, relatively new industry for me. I get the entrepreneurial thing. I studied at FIT for a while to learn fashion. So you kind of need to figure out what you need to know in the industry that you want to launch in, and you need to develop enough confidence in your instinct that you can kind of go out there and float in the ocean of that industry, and knowing that you're going to be attacked from different sides, but to be able to make your way confidently. I mean, there are so many people, and the final category I would say is just again ties in with the faith, but a little bit of stubbornness. Stick with your idea, stick with it, because you had it for a reason. Obviously, you're all incredibly bright people and know how to do your research and your competitive analysis and your, 5-point analysis or whatever they call it these days. But, you're going to figure out where you stand, your competitive landscape in the industry. Stick with it. I cannot tell you how many people have tried to change my business model since I started. And again, fashion being a new thing, the industry, the dynamics, the type of people, I wasn't expecting it. I was like, hey, I have an MBA. I'm like a smart kid, and I know what I'm doing. And I like to think of myself as very young, as you noticed. But so many people were like, no, you don't want to do that. You want to do this. From day one of my design, my concept, why would women want that? They always carry handbags. Why would they want pockets in their jackets? I mean, little things. And initially I was like, okay, I'm pretty flexible. I'll consider that. But don't be, a pinball when you're getting ideas and input and advice from people who are in the industry or mentors. Just, be a little stubborn with your idea. Hold on to it, because I've found that, you want to evolve. Maybe it's part of that fanaticism. You definitely want to be open and flexible and willing to change, but don't lose sight of that idea, because that is the gem. That's the core, kind of the sparkling diamond that starts it all. And I think that can really drive you far.
I was going to add one other F word besides faith, which is which is failure. And I really believe that you have to love failure, and you really have to embrace it. Like you will not get it right. No matter how smart you are, no matter what you've studied, as soon as you try to start a business, like, you will fail in lots of little ways, or maybe big ways. And if you don't love that feeling of failing and being able to use it to fuel where you're going to go next, then you will fail. But I think just having that, internalizing that failure is a good thing. It's your friend. Is something that's important. Yeah,
one other thing I kind of wanted to add too that wasn't mentioned is sort of a creative intuition about solving problems and using the resources around you, and actually a shameless ability to exploit those resources around you. So literally, there's this notion, I think, that entrepreneurs are, that it's kind of lonely at the top and you're all by yourself, and you're the lone person making everything happen. And that's actually far from the truth, because everyone has people that they know, but there's a lot of people who start businesses come from other industries that they worked in before, and you have your family, you have your colleagues, you have your friends, whatever it is. Being shameless about asking those people for help and kind of realizing that it's okay and you're supposed to do that, I think is something that a lot of entrepreneurs stumble to realize, and it's actually not the right way to think about it at all, because no one achieves any success in business by themselves. So I think even as an entrepreneur, the notion that you're all alone is not true.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question for this section, and then I want to move our panel towards talking about the brass tacks of actually getting the business funded and building the business. So my last question about the entrepreneur's personality, if you will, is the notion of risk. So one of a recent conversation I had in my own current pursuit, someone asked me, how do you look at risk? Do you think it's super risky to go out on your own and do something that's non-corporate? And my response was sort of non-traditional in the sense that I think it's actually kind of less risky than taking the corporate route, right? Because at the end of the day, it's, as you guys have all very eloquently articulated, it's your vision, it's your decision-making, it's your values at the front of the line. So I wanted to get a sense, that's my own personal interpretation, you guys might disagree or agree with me, but I wanted to probe a little bit about the notion of risk, because I think a lot of people here who might be thinking of entrepreneurial ventures may feel like it's too risky. So how do we look at that, and how did you guys frame it, in your experiences? Linda, could you give us a kickoff here?
I think it's highly risky. I think not driving a regular paycheck and getting health benefits, and depending upon if you're the responsible party for your family or for yourself, it's a lot. Let me rephrase that. It's a different equation if you have a spouse or a partner who's supporting you. I think there are a lot of variables that you need to consider, but the risk goes beyond just that paycheck. It is about creating an environment that not only you're going to make money in, but you're going to get satisfaction from. And I think, like any job change, people have ideas about entrepreneurship, but I would urge everyone to really go talk to people who have done something comparable. Whether you're changing jobs, changing industries, changing law firms, going from public to private, going from private to public, I think doing research and learning from people, even if they're not exactly like you, what it's like, and asking questions that get them talking so that you really get a sense of what your day-to-day is going to be like. The thing I am most grateful for is after Chicago, I went to work at Davis Polk as a litigation paralegal. And if I had not done that, I would have gone straight to law school. And working in litigation and then managing paralegals and then doing recruitment at another firm convinced me I love being around lawyers, because I love the intellectual diatribe and the discourse, but I didn't actually want to practice law myself. And there are a lot of students who went straight in from one thing to another, whether it was law or whether it was a different profession, who now look back and say, I can't believe I did that. And I think that research isn't necessarily done. A lot of the impetus for people on what I've read going on to their own consulting firms is they've gotten laid off. So rather than producing a card that says, and I used to coach my candidates to say this when I was in recruitment, saying your name, putting a mini resume on a card long before it was she to do this, and basically putting down your objective from your resume, what you're looking for doing, and how somebody can help you. They would smack on consultants on their card. And what they really wanted was they wanted a job, but they were too embarrassed to put that down onto a card, so they thought putting consultants on it made it more credible and that they would have more clout. And my view always was you're missing an opportunity for somebody to actually help you get what you want. So if you don't ask for it, you don't get it. So I would say ask away. I think the risk is incredibly high. Go to the library, buy books about what it's really like, and talk to people you know who've done it either successfully or unsuccessfully, and figure out why you're going to be able to succeed at this.
So, Jesse and Josh, you guys are, again, recent grads, and your startup just launched this year. So how would you answer?
Has anyone read Malcolm Gladwell's article on entrepreneurship that was in the New Yorker maybe like 2-3 months ago?
Yeah. 2 months ago.
So whoever hasn't read it, I highly suggest you look it up because it's a brilliant article. It's really good. And it sort of goes to what I'm about to say, which is I disagree with that point. And I would say, like Elaine, that I think being an entrepreneur is all about reducing risk. And if from our perspective, I believe that that risk is about information, and it's about controlling information, and everything you do as an entrepreneur, every step you take, is all about reducing your risk. And, while the economy may be difficult in today's times, getting a corporate job or working, getting paid in some capacity is I think pretty easy, and it's not necessarily that's not really what it's about. But anyway, the point is that I believe that being an entrepreneur is not risky. You want to add on?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add, and I agree with that, relating it a little bit to, I got my MBA in May, and, most of my counterparts there are all going into sort of traditional MBA feeder industries, particularly management consulting and investment banking, or what's left of it. And and it was always something that sort of came up, even in conversations while I was in business school, and it was particularly among people that I was in class with, which was, I admire you for trying to start your own company. Like, I just think that, what I need to do next is I need to go work at a firm and get a little bit more experience in this industry before I can actually justify starting something on my own. And I never really understood that argument because, one, we all went to a great university, so that should be a sufficient credential enough if you even need one to start a business. Secondly, I was in a graduate program where if you don't think where you worked before plus getting an MBA was sufficient preparation, I don't know if you're just trying to accumulate resumes or what to convince yourself or give yourself some illusion of confidence that you can do it. But the idea for me really came down to I was looking at all these people that were justifying not taking the risk on these kind of philosophical grounds that they should add more experience before they decided to do it. But the thing is that you are never really going to be prepared in an absolute sense for anything you do until you try to do it. And going back to Jesse's point that he made before about really kind of having an appetite or a willingness or just the disposition to accept failure as part of the process, I think that's something that you just have to experience, and there's no preparation that you can have in any business setting, in any school, that's going to get you fully ready for that, so you kind of just have to walk in and embrace it. I'm saying that from a privileged perspective because I think what you mentioned is relevant. You can't overlook the fact that we're relatively young. I don't have a family of kids yet, so I can afford to make that calculated risk. But even still, I think that a lot of people sort of shy away from making an entrepreneurial decision on these kinds of conventional arguments that are fairly hollow.
Yeah, there are a variety of risks. I mean, there's the personal risk, the personal financial risk. The only thing you own is your time. So you're going to risk your time in this venture. And you're going to learn along the way, and it probably won't be your first. Like, I'm on my fourth or fifth. I don't know. I lose track after a while. the so and to some degree, I'd like to say that being an entrepreneur is a young person's game, at least from my perspective. 100-hour weeks, no kids, makes it a lot easier. I'm married now. I have a 4-year-old. I approach things a little bit differently now. I also have the luxury of having a track record, which helps me start the next business. So my risk has been lowered substantially over time. You become less risky as an investment for someone else because they are investing in you the more experience you get. So you have your own personal risk, the emotional risk. The funny thing about it is you go to a VC, and I think I'm the only VC. Well, you guys have investors, but I'm sort of the only VC-backed person here. And you go in to these VCs, and the last thing they want to hear is the word innovative, new, special. What they want to hear is this is proven, traditional, guaranteed, tried and true. It doesn't matter how innovative it is. They want to hear there is no risk. Of course, they also know that half their investments are going to fail. Okay, but you have to put up this front to some degree that you've essentially mitigated as much risk as you can. You understand as much about the risk as you can. So I think part of this is if you understand the risk and you understand the equations as best you can, you've handled it as best you can. I play poker, and I've been doing it for a long time. And people say, well, you gamble. Well, poker player never sees it as gambling. Okay, it's mathematics. It's probability, it's knowing the pot odds, it's knowing the implied odds, and then you make your best bet, okay? You have a pile of chips in front of you, and it's not unlike starting a business. You've got to know all the risks, know the odds. You play the game the best you can, and, things will happen outside your control, and you'll deal with those. So it's not so much is it risky as it's not risky. Everything has risk. It's how well you manage the risk, how well you educate yourself to the risk. And then whether or not you're willing to accept what you understand.
I have, I think, a very different perspective from the rest of the panel. And I think that risk, how you view risk, really, it just depends on how your life philosophy and why you're becoming an entrepreneur. I think very typically when we think of entrepreneurs, we think of people who are venture funded, especially, the experience I had in the dot-com days where I was a consultant to all the people who had been funded to help them develop their sites and their strategies. That's one way to do it. And yes, absolutely, if you're going to be taking someone's money, and if I were investing in a company, I would fully expect, the employees to be totally committed and working long hours and, going through that grind. However, what I'm trying to do with my life now is very different, and I think it's kind of a gift. And I feel like I'm doing things in reverse because when the young men at the other end of the table were talking about, just go for it, just do it. Who cares how much experience you have? I remember having that perspective, and it's totally valid. And that's their life philosophy. That's where they are at this point in their lives. And I think that, for me, I'm at a very different pace. I have 4 children. I'm divorced. I started this business, I've been divorced for a long time, so it's nothing new, but I have a lifestyle now which allows me to have time with my kids, build my business. I work with so many freelancers that have very interesting and non-traditional is not the right word, but different ways of structuring their time. In fashion, there's so many freelancers that you can create a business and you can create a whole new reality and get help from a whole bunch of people and mitigate your risk of launching your business, and you can have a normal kind of life. I disagree with the perspective that to be an entrepreneur you have to be willing to sacrifice, whether it's family or lifestyle. You just have to recognize that your pace is going to be different. I am not looking for venture money right now. I'm enjoying being able to build this business at the pace that I'm building it. I did my first show in July. I spent a year in product development, which is a really long time in fashion. But we really nailed it. We got it right in terms of our silhouettes and the fit. Our customers are thrilled. So now we're doing shows all over the place, at law firms, at hotels, at country clubs. targeting these, high-end professional women, and the response has been spectacular, and I'm enjoying it. At some point, yes, I do think I will turn to money from VC, and maybe the equation will change for me. But my point in going through this whole story is really just to say there's no set way of being an entrepreneur or becoming an entrepreneur or, of living the life of an entrepreneur. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about it, is that it's a gift to be able to define that for yourself. And I love what I do every day, so I'm thrilled about that.
Thank you. Okay, so moving to our next topic area, let's talk cash. I think, during the first part of the panel, the concept of bootstrapping has come up. And it sounds like, Linda, you've bootstrapped your various startups, and Josh and Jesse, you probably did at the beginning. And George, given your area of pursuit in our conversation earlier, it sounds like you had investors who came in. So I think that's probably kind of a top-of-mind consideration when anyone's thinking of pursuing their own business, how to go about raising funds, whether it's, through friends and family, through your own, bank account, or whether you go to an institutional entity. So if you could share with the audience about how you looked at it when you started your venture, and maybe your personal experiences with the pros and cons if you've gone both. And I think that would probably apply most to Jesse and Josh. But let's start with George.
Well, I focus in the technology sector. I choose. I'm a little bit like a venture capital investor myself, because I'm investing my time. So I will literally I've probably looked at a few thousand opportunities and invested my time in a few. And then those ventures that I choose to pursue, generally I'm looking for something that is patent protected. I always look for IP protection that has a unique value and so forth. And you can go through the normal list that venture capital guys look for. But mine require significant amounts of cash. I need labs. I need scientists, and I needed geneticists, molecular biologists. I needed equipment. In other ones, I've needed hardware developers, software developers, whatever it may be. Mine's a capital-intensive technology development business, so I'm going to need capital. Initially with seed money, I will take friends and family money, but what I'm really looking for are knowledgeable investors. I get my money from a variety of places. I will look to government entities. I've had some success there. There are STTRs, which are technology transfer grants from the federal government to get things into the private sector. SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research. There are CRADAs, Cooperative Research and Development Agreements with federal labs. Heck, I even got an earmark one time from the Defense Department. There you can really look for interesting places to go get that money. In dealing with and that's just a matter of finding those resources, learning about them, doing your research. What I would suggest you do, and a lot of people for some reason don't do this, is find people who have gotten those grants before, or that money before, or money from venture capital groups you've spoken with, and ask them, how did you do it? What worked? What didn't? I mean, a lot of people walk into venture capital groups and just press the wrong buttons, as opposed to talking to three people who have gotten money from them before and said, what did they bite on? Okay, and learning what it is. So I'd say do a lot of research and going to VC. Go to VCs that know your space, that have invested in companies very similar to yours, that aren't direct competitors, but are very similar to yours. You want a knowledgeable investor in the tech arena. You don't want to educate an investor in the tech arena. If you're educating an investor, they'll never invest in you. You're there for their education. The only investor you're going to get is a knowledgeable investor in the tech arena. At least that's the one you want, I think. The only other thing I'd add to that, and this is also a sales piece, it's always sales. You're always positioning yourself. never try to sell to somebody who doesn't want to buy. A lot of venture capital, a lot of early stage entrepreneurs think they've got the greatest thing, and they keep trying to sell to people who don't want it, okay? There are a lot of people out there that want your product. Don't talk to the people that don't want it. If a VC says we're not interested, don't tell them why you're so great, okay? Go find the VC that is interested. Go find the investor that is interested, all right? Don't waste your time on the people that aren't. And don't waste people's time. You know, maintain your credibility when you're going out and raising money with the venture capital groups. There are probably 20 VCs that I have very good relationships with, none of which have ever invested in my ventures. But because I didn't waste their time, because I was prepared when I went in, because I'd done my homework, because I gave them exactly what they needed to quickly evaluate what I did, they take my calls. They look at my plans. I may only call them once every 2 years, but I know a partner there, and they say, yeah, we'll take a look at it. Come on in and pitch us. All right? I don't have to go through 3 or 4 layers to get there. So you have to be very careful about those relationships. Treat their time as you would your own. Do your homework before you get in. And don't sell to people that aren't interested in buying. You will waste more time doing that. I did that for the first 2 years of being an entrepreneur.
So on the other side, Linda, it sounds like for both of the companies you've run, you've bootstrapped, right, from beginning to end. So can you talk a little bit about that? And, did you ever look at outside funding and, those considerations?
So not including the flower comb business, which I started with $25 in the 70s. I started Intelligent Marketing Solutions in 1997 with $5,000 that my then husband, there's a theme developing here, begrudgingly agreed. And for me, the impetus for starting my own business at that particular moment in time was I told the executive director of the firm that I was then at that the managing partner was looking at porn on the very new website and internet, and that it wasn't cool, and that he was going to have legal problems, no pun intended. And I was fired. And I think that I want to share that with you because if any of you out there have been fired, it was the one and only time I was fired, and it truly was the best thing that ever happened to me. But we agreed that $5,000 was going to be my allotment to see if I could get this up and running. And that was in March. April 7th, I incorporated in 97. And I started working immediately getting a database up and running. I sent out a postcard mailing to 5,000 of my closest contacts. This was before email marketing and constant contact. And it said, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Linda and her juicer can be reached at. And I got a great response, and I started doing the old-fashioned sales. I got on the phone, and I wasn't sure what I was exactly selling at that point. I knew it was marketing, I knew it was technology, and I had an inkling it was going to be related to recruitment. But I was flexible, and I was willing to actually follow the path of the work. And I put my money in the places that I thought I would get the most immediate return. And whatever that is for you, I think that people think you need a huge amount of money. Now, granted, if you're investing in a technology-based company and you need to hire other people to actually produce some of the work, or you need either equipment or it's a cash-intensive pursuit, it's different. This was a service-based business that was dependent upon me and me alone to get it going. That business grew substantially. I actually funded my second venture, Map Your Life, much to the chagrin of my then husband. And I put close to $100,000 into Map Your Life over a few years. And it was really a fabulous idea to this day. I'm sorry that it didn't have legs. I've seen other self-help folks come out in the market. It was basically, indulge me for 30 seconds, it was you figured out where and why you'd been happiest, and you mapped it on a life map. And it was concentric circles. And you basically could walk through and try to recreate those experiences in your life. And it was a passion for me. I had been doing consulting and recruiting and helping so many people try to figure out why they weren't happy in their jobs. And then they said, can you give me these questions so I can figure it out in my life? So that's how Map Your Life got started. Intuition Financial Placement was my second recruitment venture and third business, and I did that with a partner. For me, that was a mistake. At the time, not the idea of partnership. It was the wrong person. I didn't do my research, but we built a very successful business, and I let her keep the name and the actual business up and running for a piece of the ongoing profits for a period of time. And then I, having at that point maybe a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old, I now have, no, it was earlier than that, they were littler. I have a 9 and a 6-year-old now. I went back in-house for a very brief period of time. I worked as a financial advisor for Bernstein. They were a client of mine. I loved them. I still love them. They're everything that University of Chicago stands for. And I went in. I missed the flexibility of being able to see my kids and be at my son's first day of kindergarten. I had to get special permission to be there, and I thought, whoa, I've been doing entrepreneurship for way too long. Having to ask somebody to be at my kid's first day of kindergarten isn't going to work for me. So I was there for about 10 months, and then after doing a fair amount of research about the Venn diagram that for me is marketing, technology, and visual, I landed back in intelligent video solutions, which is my pursuit now. And like my previous early ventures, I went back to what I knew and said, I'm going to start out with a little bit more than 5,000. But I built it up the same way I built the first time. And we are actually expanding. I do have a business model in place. Service is not scalable when it's contingent upon yourself. And the idea that I don't want to necessarily always be producing something that's dependent upon me or other people. But this time I'm older, I'm wiser, I'm putting systems in place right now. And I think the younger gentleman at the end said something very wise, which is utilize the resources of people who are in your lives. And it took me to my 40s to get there, but I'm grateful that I did because I've got a great board of advisors who are helping me build out this next step. So for me, the next wonderful adventure will hopefully be going and selling my soul to the venture capitalists. So I'm teasing. They're lovely, wonderful people.
No, they're not that.
Somewhere between the two.
Jesse, before you answer, can you just give the audience a background? So did you guys invest your own capital at the very start, and then you sought investors? How did it go?
Yeah, so we initially started just with sweat equity. We were paying people off of our credit cards and savings. We're still not paying ourselves, so that would be good to change at some point. Eventually, but yeah, we started off just using our own money, savings and credit cards, things like that, and then eventually we went out to friends and family and people who trusted us, believed in us, and wanted to help us achieve our vision to invest a little bit of money. Again, not a whole lot, and now we're actually in the process of raising a seed round from investors, like traditional angel investors and some venture capitalists, but not a whole lot. We're not really focused in that community. So that's sort of the background of where we are. So we're actually going through a fundraising process right now. And Josh will probably add to this, but there's no formula to this. So fundraising is an art, and it's an art that you'll probably it's an art that you learn by kind of feel as opposed to look, and a lot of this comes down to the old cliche, which is cash is king. It's all about cash. So if you can't get cash for whatever you're making for a long period of time, then you need capital to fund that. If you can get cash early on for whatever you're doing, then you probably don't need as much capital. And the other kind of important element, and there's just always a ton of moving pieces, but your business when you started, it's a pizza pie. You have 100% of that pie, and as you bring on more investors, you start giving away slices of that pie. And at some point, if you don't do it the right way, you'll end up with a very small slice, and you're working now for your investors. So all of a sudden now you've effectively bought yourself a boss, which is probably not why you started your own company in the first place. So it's just something that you're constantly navigating, and it's tough. It's not easy.
No. The only thing that I'm kind of thinking of too is just who you raise money from is really, really important. And, it's a marital commitment. Like if it works out, it's great. You make love and it's, happy, whatever. You go on your honeymoon and you all make money together. If it doesn't, it's probably messy and litigious and it's a nightmare and it ruins value, it ruins your employees, it ruins everything. So, our company is unique in the sense that we are a early stage technology company that's building, proprietary technology that's similar to a lot of the things that are being built right now in the kind of social media space, but our actual market that we're addressing is something that traditional venture capitalists don't necessarily understand. And finding that balance between people who could actually help our business grow and understand it and get it, and the people who are actually experienced investors at the same time is not an easy combination to find. So, and the truth is that, we probably could have raised, Jesse mentioned we're raising a seed round right now, we probably could have closed it relatively quickly if it was just a matter of getting people to write checks, but we've held out on, the goal of actually finding the right people to be in our business with us. And, that matters more than, accelerating your growth or hiring people. And like that trade-off that you make is something you make every day with every decision when you're starting a company. So you always want to go faster. You always want more people. You always want, to bring on more customers, but you have to balance those things with the way of actually doing things you think are going to be correct also.
Yeah, and the fact that the fundraising, fundraising happens at a singular point in time when you're running your business, but then it lasts. it lasts. Like, it doesn't just go away. So the decisions that enter into that situation will affect everything. And a lot of times it's about control. It's about where you want to see the business going. It's about when you want to sell the business. If you don't control the business anymore because you've taken on the wrong investors, they can force you to sell when you don't want to. There's lots of issues with that.
In terms of finding money, one of the things I'd suggest is when you choose your service providers, your attorneys, your accountants, choose them to know where you can find money. You don't know everybody in the world. They know more people, and their partners know more people. And don't be bashful. Okay, I mean, go ask. Do you know anybody who might be interested in investing in this? Because they do. Your own personal money manager, pick one that has connections. And even in the tech companies, we're always looking at sweat equity. So, I always spend a lot of time before I go out and raise money. I get the license done. Attorneys will put their time in if they're going to be our attorneys later. Accountants will put their time in. They will risk their time, and that also shows a future investor that other people believe in you. Who's in? Who's on your team? Have they been paid? No. Okay, that tells me something about you. So that's another way of gaining investment. Those people giving you their time. I'm starting a venture right now in education publishing. I've got a few developers that are helping me just because they want to work with me, because I've worked with them before. I've got counsel. I've got a bunch of professional service providers on board, and they're doing this because they think it's a worthwhile venture, and they are looking for business somewhere down the line, and they're probably a little slow right now. So their business is a little slow. So you can take advantage of that, and that's another type of investor you can get in your business.
Okay, thanks. So I want to leave enough time for the audience to ask questions, and then I know there was a networking portion at the end. 1 second. I just had one last question with respect to building a team, right? So Josh and Jesse, you guys are a team, came as a team, so you're lucky that I think that you have each other. But some of my...
It's so tender.
Some of my friends and close friends who are entrepreneurs, one of the things I've noticed is that because they care so dearly about what they're doing and have put their sweat equity and put their own funds in, it's very hard for them to bring in other people to sort of match the growth that they might be experiencing, as much as they know they need to bring in people. So my question, I guess, for the sort of experienced entrepreneurs is, how do you know when to bring in people, and what are the traits that you look for? Is it the same person on the other side of the table as if you're looking in the mirror, or are there other traits that you're searching for? Linda, do you want to? And let's keep it,
short.
Sure.
I
Keep
think
it
it
short,
depends what that other person is supposed to be doing, and you have to assess that first and foremost. What I alluded to earlier was, the person that I partnered with had knowledge of people and the industry sector, but she and I weren't a good fit. I was used to pulling a computer out of the back of my car and lugging it up a couple of stairs by myself. She wanted to find somebody to help her carry it. And I had had numerous business ventures before, and she had worked corporate her whole life. So I would just say that other people bring a lot to the party, and I think it's a great sign of faith and commitment if professionals are going to be willing to offer some of their services for a little piece of the pie, but really being honest with yourself about what you're looking for in that someone else is the first step. And then you don't just go with the person who perhaps is right there and available. You might, here again, have to do a little bit of research to find that right person.
I would say, there's a difference between hiring and finding a partner. With finding a partner, that's an organic process that you suddenly realize you've got a partner, and you're moving forward. But I pick a partner that has complementary skill sets to yourself. You don't want to be looking in the mirror. In terms of finding employees, there's this. You want your senior people to have had experience in entrepreneurial settings. Your first hires, you want to have good entrepreneurs who understand. Well, we never missed a payroll, but we came pretty close a few times, and at least they understand the challenges with starting a venture. But one mistake I made was I tried to hire all entrepreneurs or experienced entrepreneurs when I should have been hiring a lot of Indians. I should have been hiring a lot of people when we got to a certain point, just pure skill set people. That's different than hiring partners.
Thank you. I didn't clarify that.
That's a great response. Gurjo, do you have anything to add? And how about you guys? One last comment about your partnership?
Oh, our partnership. Well, I was just getting our partnership. It is really hard, and we're trying to find people all the time. And I think one of the lessons we hear from a lot of early stage startup people is that you really want to focus on hiring rock stars. If they can't prove their value quickly, it's not worth it. It's not worth trying to train them. It's not worth trying to give them a chance. You got to be a little heartless about this. We get people all the time who are smart, and they're on paper they look great, and then we start working with them, and it becomes very clear very quickly that it's just going to be more of a burden than a benefit, and you got to cut those ties.
Yeah, because there's definitely a balance between wanting to get bodies in the door and being obsessive about finding the right people.
That's very true.
And when it actually comes to finding the right people, I would kind of touching on a comment that was made probably at the beginning about being a perfectionist. I would say when it comes to people,
maybe not even 80. And that has to do with, first, setting up your corporation. Setting up a sole proprietorship might save you an extra tax filing versus setting up a LLC as a partner. Then both your partner and you have to file. So would you advise on just doing it right from the beginning? The difference is probably a couple $100 at best. And second is finding the right people. I think you're saying find the right person. And then I see myself looking for a software company. I'm starting a software company and a consulting firm. And I'm looking for someone that can connect with CEOs of Fortune 500 retailers like Best Buy, Walmart. Now, these people have a certain look. They can play golf with them. The charismatic country club salesperson is who I'm envisioning. Now, I will pay whatever I need to pay to have that person grow this team. But would you say, let's say I meet someone else like her, she might get the job done. Now, would you risk doing that, or would you potentially just seek out that country club type of sales? And by the way, if you fit that bill and you're interested, please find me.
He clearly has the sales down pat.
Yes, and so I do analytics. I don't do sales. I play golf and pretty good. But will the CEO want to hang out with me? But they hired me to be an analytics person, but will they want to hang out with me, have a beer, smoke a cigar? Probably not.
So is your question, just to paraphrase
So there was a question in there. Would you do it right? Or would you potentially, invest time and say, hey, you know what, I'll take a chance on you. Be our global salesperson. You go, hook up and develop business ideas with CEOs. What would you advise? Either, both, maybe have two sales teams?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna get this down because granular. We'll be around here afterwards, and we can certainly talk a little bit. But I want it to be applicable. I want it to be. I'm not analytics though. I hire people for analytics. I can't emphasize enough. Hire properly on your professionals. Don't try to skimp on saving a couple $100 at the beginning because you're going to spend so much more money at the end. Get some books, figure out what type of corporation, LLC, if you want to be in Delaware, if you're going to be seeking money afterwards. But I think the most important thing, nobody really said this, it was touched on, hire a great lawyer and a great accountant at the beginning because the amounts of business advice and direction and guidance and find out, make sure that not only are they coming with good recommendations or referrals, but that they understand the business that you're going to be in. Because just like hiring or bringing in VCs with money who understand your industry sector, you don't want to be teaching them about the nuances of software technology or software consulting. You want them to have experience in teaching you not only about the legal or the accounting rules, but about business in general. And to your other part, as far as hiring properly, I think everybody's said, yes, don't take a chance. Do the research. Put somebody who you may know through all of the same proper protocol and do reference checks. I can't believe how many people don't do reference checks. And speak to people who have had a track record in doing what you want them to do.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Any other questions? Yes.
Hi.
Can you stand up and
Sure.
so people can hear you?
My name is Deborah, and my question is, well, to start off, I have a day job, and I'm currently working on a business idea. And I was hoping this might come up during the discussion around risk. If you talk about being a part-time entrepreneur, having your day job, but also working on your business and getting it going that way, what your thoughts are on that?
It's a great way to go. I mean, I think we've all done it. I'm doing it now. I've done it with all my other companies. Sometimes I'm looking at 2 or 3 things and they don't pan out. But it's sort of a start, and, at least in my experience, it's been a start and stop thing. Suddenly I'm going to need to spend 25 hours one week. And as it begins to take over more and more of my life, it's like, okay, is this going to go? All right, let's pull the trigger and make the switch. So that's a great way to go. You can spend your nights, spend your weekends, and you can reduce the risk, assess the risk, develop these pieces. And the beginning is always slow. You don't need a lot of full-time people in your company in the beginning. You don't need full-time employees. You don't need full-time CFOs. You don't need full-time attorneys. So everybody does everything part-time in the beginning until you get to a certain point where you begin to add people in. And that growth is a challenge, especially if you haven't done it before. And you begin to develop, if you've done this a couple of times, you begin to develop a sense of when you're ready to go full-time.
I would add that it takes 6 months minimum to get the ball rolling. That's just the way, physics works, I think. And no reason to lose out on cash flow when you're developing the business. But I'll tell a quick story. When I started my first business, the e-commerce strategy business, it was just me. I came from a consulting background. I was comfortable with the rate times hour type of, generating money that way. And I had agreed with my husband at the time, like, let's give it 6 months. I wasn't working on anything else. We had just moved to New York, and I was like, let me just give this a shot. Nothing was happening. I was pounding the pavement, pitching online banking to chief technology officers. People were stealing my ideas. It was awful. And, and it started looking like maybe I need to get a job. And I really did not want to because I wanted to be able to commit the time to developing the business. And it got so bad that I decided, okay, worst case scenario, I'll get like a temp job because I really did not want to have to shift my energy from developing the business, doing those proposals, pitching, to working for someone else and trying to, get the business off the ground. So I remember I went to, I think it was like Kelly Services or something. There's the temp agencies. You hire like a secretary from there. And it was embarrassing as hell. I mean, I took the test and the word test. Oh, they said, "Oh my God, you got the highest score that anyone's ever gotten, on Word Perfect." And I was like, "Yeah," And I was willing. To go through that embarrassment, personal embarrassment, just to, try to hold on to this idea. And after I, got a perfect A on that test, I got my first gig. And I still remember it was Dreyfus here in the city. And I think a consultant contact of mine was pulling me in on a project. And I had written a part of the proposal, and I think they were going to pay me like $800 for it. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, you're going to pay me money to do this? And this is what I want to do. So my point is that, as we were saying, that all you have is your time. And while you do want to keep your cash coming in, and obviously we all have financial restrictions we have to deal with, you got to just stick with it, be able to stick with it long enough to get the ball rolling.
I have to ask a quick question. Is the business that you're thinking of getting into in any way, shape, or form connected to what you do in your day job? Okay. So the answer was kind of, and the statement that I want to make is be extremely careful, because I don't know how many of you saw The Social Network, but there's a fabulous scene where, the idea of stealing an idea comes around, and you may have signed documents when you started your first day there, even if in no way are you connected to what you might be doing. But the intellectual property components and the idea of secrets. And I would urge you to talk to an attorney, and I would urge you to either do some research online, and I would urge you to go back and look at the documents you signed when you started working there and see if there's any sort of non-compete. And I'm not a lawyer, but I do play one on TV occasionally.
Next question? Yes.
So I have a question about valuation, especially early stage valuation. Because before you have your revenue and you have sort of a business plan, you can put all the projections you want on a piece of paper and you can tell people you're going to be a $500 million or $1 billion company, but obviously you're not going to be able to raise money off of that valuation. So, what essentially it boils down to, and I'm just kind of want to get your feedback on this, is that you figure out how much cash you need, and then it becomes a little bit of an art, because in order to raise that cash, you got to give up an attractive enough percentage. And I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, because that seems to kind of be the exercise that
it's remarkably formulaic. I mean, we all talk about valuation, and at the early stage, if you've got a patent, you've got a license, you've got a prototype, these are, you can mess around with valuations, but you can go around and ask, and, what it was 5 years ago was, if you had a patent and a license and maybe, a prototype, and, you could be $4 million pre-money and you could raise 2 on 4. Now it's 1 on 2. Okay, just because of the market, and if you can get anybody to invest in an early stage technology company at this point. So, you ask around and you see what the going rate is. You ask the VC point blank, what types of deals do you do like? And you can mess around the edges. You ask 3 or 4 VCs, you go to PwC, what's the database they've got? I forget what it is. Money Tree. You'll see how much people put in. You call up those CFOs, call the CFOs of companies, and ask them, how'd your valuation go with this group? What was the discussion like? That, again, go to people that got money from the people you're talking to and ask them how the valuation discussion went. It is art, it is negotiation, but it's when you're you're going to be in a capital intensive business, you're going to go through 3 or 4 rounds. You're going to take a hit in the beginning, and it's not a service industry. It might not scale. It might take you $20 million to get to market. It's a different story than service industries and software industries. It's a very different.
And it's not just valuation either; it's the terms around it. So exactly. You have to be mindful of the liquidation preferences and the other participations, because getting a great valuation but having 4 times liquidation preference to the VC, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And who your investor is, what they bring to the table along with that. So yeah, that's where you really need a good attorney to walk you through, read everything you can about term sheets, and then go through the investment documents with a fine-tooth comb, because they will throw shit in there. Oh my goodness, it is stunning what they will try and get away with I've actually gone through term sheets with markups, ready for signatures. You get the last one back. They didn't mark up the document, but they put a change in there. Okay? So you run a compare on, you don't trust the markup, you run a compare because they will do stuff like that. So you've got to be really careful about stuff like that.
And also, this doesn't necessarily apply to every type of business, but if you're spending a lot of time arguing with your investors over valuation and terms at an early stage, it's probably not the right partner for you. I mean, what's the point? The
valuation comes well after they've made a decision to invest
in you.
They're not going to make a decision to invest on the valuation.
Right.
They're making a decision to invest in you and the future of your company. And the valuation, it's funny, we don't have valuation discussions. They'll ask you day one when you walk in, well, what's your valuation? And if it's not insane, like you don't have any clue at all, the discussion will continue. If you say, well, we think we're $122 million pre-money, you will not have a second meeting with them probably, unless you have an extraordinarily compelling product or service.
Okay. Well, we'll have time for about 2 more questions, and then we'll break, and you guys can meet the panelists and mix and mingle. Sir.
Don't want to be pessimistic about it.
Can you stand up and so I can hear you?
If a business is not going well, what point do you stop?
I've done that. Okay. Well, one is when you run out of money. Okay, that is an absorbing boundary. Okay, and it is devastating. I mean, you work on something it still get, you got to let people go. You've worked on something for 4 or 5 years, and you hit the wall, and you have a falling out with a partner, whatever it is. It is, you do everything you can. You invoke God. You write letters to their wives, whatever it is, their husbands, their children, whatever it is you need to do to keep it going, because you believe in it, you keep it going, and then there's just no more. Right? That's it. Okay, there is no more. There's no more money in the bank. Your investors aren't going to come back in, and that's the end of the day. Okay, you try your best to unravel it. You tell the people you owe money to what the situation is, and you try to unravel it the best way you know how. And because, again, it's your reputation. You try and you might see it coming. You might think it coming and it doesn't come, which is nice. But yeah, another time to do it is when you're tired and you don't have the passion for it anymore and you can't do it right. Okay, I haven't run into that part, but I have run into, oops, there's no more money. Okay, and then you got to shut it down. So it's a challenge, and it's not easy, but it took me 4.5 years to reach that point with my first company. I still know it's a great product. I still know it would work, but the environment being what it is, the regulatory environment, the structure of the industry, doesn't matter whether or not it makes sense. So.
One more question. Hiya.
This is sort of more of a basic question. I think a lot of us are thinking of someday having your own business, but it's always really hard to just quit your job that pays you every month. So if you could share with us sort of like the specific steps or thought process you went through before taking that jump. And also, I think having your own business is very administrative. You have to know which entity to form, and like marketing and sales is very important. It's not something that you necessarily think about when you think that you have this great idea, you want to have your own business. And I heard you guys saying do your research. So do you do that before you quit your job? And what kind of specific research steps did you go through before going into it?
So I think quitting the bonds of corporate, quitting the corporate bondage is one of the most liberating things you can do. Steve Jobs gave a speech at Stanford a while back. It's pretty well known. I'm sure a lot of you have read it. And he had this one memorable passage, which I always remember, which was that if you wake up enough days in a row not liking what you're about to do for that day, then you should probably change something. And for me, I had been living in Dubai for about 2.5 years, which in my opinion was 2.5 years too long. And it got to the point where I was waking up and thinking I loved my job and what I did, and the experiences were fantastic. But you just wake up one day and you realize that it's just not. It's not good. Things are not going in the direction you want, and you're not achieving all the things that you want, and you're not passionate anymore about it. It's the thing about you're just not passionate about what you were doing, and it's time for a change. And when you reach that point and you realize that there's more out there for you, or that you want to take more from life than what you're currently getting, then that's liberating. And it's scary, in a way, but that fear is liberating. And I did no research into LLCs or C Corps or blah, 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 or whatever. I mean, I still don't even know what, I know what we are, but my point is, I know what we are, and these things matter, but my point is that all the details about starting a business are details. I mean, it really stems from this fundamental precept of wanting to create something on your own.
I would also add that, it just depends on what you need, what you think you need. When you have a regular job and a regular paycheck, you get accustomed to a certain lifestyle. But then when you feel that spark and you're inspired and you want, to take more from life, then, you just do a mental equation of, do I really need coffee from Starbucks? Do I really need to eat meat? What are my priorities? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sacrifice everything to start a business. I would certainly advocate like a slow, I've never been in a technology situation, so it's different. I'm, come from more of a client service background, so there's not this urgency of speed to market. You have a good idea, you have a way of doing it, an approach, that's kind of enough. So transitioning yourself a little bit is always a good thing, and save a whole bunch of money, work towards it. It's really inspiring. And the last thing I would say is that we're so lucky to live in this country where we can start businesses freely. I used to say to my dad, he came from India in 1960, and we've gone back, and I would say to him, Dad, when I started my first business, I'm so glad you came to this country, and nothing against India or other countries similar to India, but as a woman, with whatever my, profile is, I would not have been able to have the career that I've had here. And I think, we should consider ourselves so lucky and be grateful for that and just go for it. I feel like in the U.S., if you have, some smarts and, willingness and a get up and go, you can pretty much do anything, and create a really good lifestyle for yourself. So there's not that much to be afraid of.
I look at a corporate job when I've gone back and forth a couple of times, and every time I leave my company or sold my company or closed my company and I go get a job, it's like, wow, vacation. I'm working 40 hours a week. There's a paycheck. I don't have to make payroll for 40 people. This is great. I can go home on the weekend. I'm telling you, if you think that, you've got it really good and you're really comfortable and that's nice, it's not time to move on, okay? It's a different lifestyle. Now, I can only stay in a corporate job for about 2 years, and then I go, oh, God, I got to start another business again.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah. So, you got the bug or you don't. It's sort of that way. And the first time you go out, it's scary as hell, but, you'll know when it's time to step out. I think it's just something you'll feel inside. You got to it's like, and I've never done bungee jumping, but I imagine it's, I can't stand on this platform anymore.
I've done skydiving, not bungee jumping, and jumping out of the plane was the single scariest thing I've ever done. And once the parachute opens and you're floating down, it's the best thing I've ever done. So that's an analogy. I think that if you're considering doing your own thing, I would urge you to, as part of the equation, think about an alternative job in-house also as part of that equation. Because it's not just enough to say, this is what I'm doing now. And yes, the economy is tight and the market is tight. But there are ways of reinventing yourself, and although corporate work is not necessarily right for George or I long term, It's not to say that you have to go be an entrepreneur. And I think if you have the benefit and the capability of being in-house and growing slowly and building your database up and contacting all of your networks through LinkedIn and building your LinkedIn profile, so you've got over 500 contacts of real people who are in the industry that you want to be in, and selectively communicating to people you trust that this is what you're thinking of doing, and could they hook you up with people that you could talk to. If you have that luxury of being able to derive a paycheck and health insurance, and you have the get up and go to go work, I mean, my day is I work 12-hour days in my day job. I spend a few hours with my kids, and then I have my evening job, which is part two of the same business. And, you know, that's, people say, oh, how am I going to do both? You do both because you do both when you're an entrepreneur also. So just view your evening job as, you know, getting the business up and running if that's what you're thinking. But for anybody who's thinking of doing it, it really is an amazing float down. And if you have the bug and you're itching to do it and you have the financial capability of doing it, and they and I will tend to probably disagree on this, but that's okay. I think there is some risk involved, but if you calculate it and you assess it, it can be the best reward that you can ever imagine. So.
And that's a very good note to close on. So we thank you for coming tonight. And we thank all of our panelists.